right, we'll call the meeting to order. This is the time and place for the November 6, 2023 regular board meeting of the Marshalltown Community School District. Welcome to those of you joining us here in person. Welcome as well to anybody who might be tuning in via the live stream or who might be watching this at a later time. We'll do introductions of board members before we get going too far. To my right, we have Zach Wall, Bonnie Lowry, and Jan McGinnis. To my left, Karina Hernandez and Sarah Faltis. Seated here at the center table with me to my left is Dr. Theron Schutte, our superintendent of schools, and Mr. Randy Denham, our board secretary. I am Sean Heitman. We also have one of our student school board members here in person, Daisy Covarrubias Andrade, so welcome to her. Couple of announcements. We've got a pink sign-up sheet there on the speakers table for anybody here for public comment. Please sign up there. Please understand that you will be given 5 minutes to address the board, and that Iowa law prohibits the discussion of specific employees of the district or their job performance. Also, in accordance with board policy, board members will not respond to comments so that we can comply with open meeting laws. I think that's everything. Yep. With that done, would everyone please join me in reading the mission statement of the Marshalltown Community School District? We develop learners who have the knowledge, skills, and positive mindset to successfully pursue a meaningful future through personalized learning experiences. And please stand as you're able and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
There are. We originally had a recognition or presentation from our mariachi teachers. We've moved that to November 20th. In the consent agenda is an OCR agreement of basically a workout plan for how to ensure ADA compliance of our website. And then we also received today a generous donation offer from Emerson for a piece of equipment for industrial arts. It's in the consent agenda.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Lowry Faltis, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries 6-0. Abby?
Good evening, everyone. So for recognitions tonight, starting off, American Education Week will be just before Thanksgiving, so next week. It's an annual celebration to honor the unsung heroes in our public education system who tirelessly ensure that every student receives a top-notch education here in the district. From the bus drivers to the classroom teachers, cafeteria workers to administrative staff, paraeducators, substitute teachers, and many more, we take a week to show our gratitude for their incredible efforts. I believe handing out cookies.
Yeah, we'll be sending cookies from the board as we've done in years past, and those will show up at the buildings and or departments next week.
And then this weekend is Veterans Day, so thank you to our U.S. veteran employees for their service. I know Dr. Schutte will be heading out to hand out thank you cards to those individuals and shaking hands with all of them. So that's recognitions for tonight.
Thank you, Abby. And I'm going to read, as we always do, the annual President's Proclamation for National Veterans and Military Families Month. The poet John Milton once wrote, "They also serve who only stand and wait." During National Veterans and Military Families Month, we recognize that our military and veteran families answer our nation's call to duty, and we recommit to doing right by their service and sacrifice. For me, the First Lady, and the entire Biden family, it is personal. When our son Bo was deployed to Iraq, we learned what it meant to pray every day for the safe return of someone you love. Our grandkids learned what it meant to have their dad overseas in a war zone instead of at home, tucking them into bed and reading them a story every night. Millions of Americans have had that experience. To all the mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, sons and daughters, spouses and partners, and loved ones who stand alongside our veterans and service members, you are the solid steel spine that bears up under every burden and the courageous heart that rises to every challenge. Our nation has only one truly sacred obligation: to prepare those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families while they are deployed and when they return home. Since the beginning of my administration, fulfilling that obligation has been my top priority. In June, I signed an executive order that establishes the most comprehensive set of administrative actions in our nation's history to support the economic security of military and veteran spouses, caregivers, and survivors. It encourages all federal agencies to do more to retain military spouses through flexible policies, improves the ability for spouses to maintain their employment when moving overseas, allows spouses to seek advice on overseas employment issues through military legal assistance offices for the first time, and improves spouses' access to quality, dependable, and affordable childcare. Since the beginning of my administration, I have signed more than 30 bipartisan bills to expand the services and benefits that support our veterans and their families, caregivers, and survivors, including the Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act, the most significant expansion of benefits and services for toxin-exposed veterans and survivors in over 30 years. We released a national strategy to reduce military and veteran suicide by tackling some of the root causes of this crisis, like addressing financial insecurity by expanding job training opportunities for transitioning service members and veterans and their spouses, and increasing funding to prevent and eliminate homelessness. Further, I signed an executive order that implemented historic bipartisan military justice reforms to transform how the military handles sexual assault and domestic violence cases in order to make our military safer and more just. Earlier this year, I directed the Department of Defense to review pay and benefits for our military members because our armed forces and their families deserve a 21st century compensation system that reflects their service and sacrifice. Additionally, the First Lady's Joining Forces initiative is providing support to military and veteran families, caregivers, and survivors by improving economic opportunity for military families, making school transitions easier for military children, and expanding resources to promote health and well-being for this community. Our fighting force is the greatest in the world, in no small part because year after year and decade after decade, military and veteran families have had their loved ones' backs. As a country, we owe it to these families to have their backs. This year, as we celebrate 50 years of an all-volunteer force, may we also recognize the bravery and dedication of our military and veteran families and work to repay the debt of gratitude we owe each one of them. Now, therefore, I, Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim November 2023 as National Veterans and Military Families Month. I call upon the people of the United States to honor veterans and military families with appropriate ceremonies and activities. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand this 31st day of October, and the year of our Lord 2023, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 248th. Kevin, you're just in time.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm up this quick? Oh my gosh. I've got a PowerPoint on my laptop and I didn't go to the trouble of putting it on the thumb drive and giving it to Amy so she can correct it, so I'll do that real quick. You might as well come up, Kim.
Yeah,
Everybody's probably met Kim Bellman, project architect, project manager, who's been working on the CTE project. We spent the day going through all the drawings with staff. Got a lot of good information. And we were focused on that and forgot to save this to the thumb drive.
How's he doing, Kim? You're keeping a close eye on him, is he? Oh, he's got it. Okay.
Sometimes he needs help.
I hope.
There's three PowerPoints, obviously, MCSD is the one. Okay. So when we do have the PowerPoint pulled up, it's basically some floor plan images and some line drawings that are kind of isometrics of the science spaces for the most part. An update on kind of the timeline where the budget is at. So we sent the budget over in advance for the CTE project. The estimate is up. Well, we'll just go through the drawings. I guess she's so fast. Okay. Go ahead and go through. So, there we go. So these are the floor plans of the two areas. That lavender rectangle is showing where the new spaces are. So the one on the left is the courtyard, getting filled in on the first level. That's a culinary kitchen, a commercial kitchen space for teaching lab. And then 3 science, chemistry, and physics labs, state-of-the-art labs, along with a few offices and some storage spaces and some science prep areas. And then there are quite a few spaces that are being renovated. So science labs, 4 of them along the east side of that corridor. Then there's one just across the corridor from them that currently has part of an old dark room that we absorbed to make that lab larger and fit it out. And then currently there are 2 biology labs. One is going to become the ag lab. That's the one on the west. And the one on the right is an updated biology lab. And their storage space is across the hall. Then on that southeast corner, you can see a shaded rectangle coming in. Well, that's the sidewalk that comes up to the building. We are going to be replacing 2 sets of doors there, providing new access control. And then we are replacing the greenhouse. Right now, your greenhouse is about 26 foot square, and this new greenhouse is 72 feet long. Much, much larger than the existing one. It's a new greenhouse. We spent a lot of time today working through the details of where the power and the lighting and all those kinds of things are in that space and many of the others. And then we're updating the family and consumer science residential kitchen area, and that is to the left of that lavender rectangle. Then there's some minor renovations throughout the building with some offices up above and filling in some windows that are between some of the classrooms and, well, the teacher's lounge and work area now. And then the drawing on the right shows a great deal of renovation and an addition for construction trades and small engines and automotive. And that's inside that lavender rectangle. And then up above at the top, we're redividing some spaces to provide 2 classrooms that are more kind of the lecture spaces and kit project spaces. And a large open space now that's unfinished, that's kind of used as a tornado area. That's going to become your 3rd classroom / lecture space. the large kits that are used in the curriculum. This is designed around those kits. There's some shelving and a tabletop that'll be against the north wall where those kits will be set up, and that's where you construct models of some of the construction components. We're also providing some new restrooms. There's only one restroom there now in that upper corner. It's a boys' restroom. Back in the day when it was built, this was the boys' area. Not so much anymore. So we've got some individual restrooms that are being constructed across the hall from that. And then we've got the wood shop, the welding shop, and the metal shop that are basically being totally renovated down to the bare walls. New power, data, lighting, HVAC, dust collection, welding exhaust, you name it, is happening in those rooms. New HVAC closets are being installed, and there'll be tank storage for the welding and so on. So those are as kind of the big overall of the projects. And then this kind of zooms in. So you kind of see there's that ag classroom, biology, and the greenhouse. And there's a little key plan over to the right. Kind of shows you this is area D that we're talking about. It's all new casework. This drawing is a little bit older. The ag lab is showing a faded line around the room. That's the casework. 2 weeks ago when we were here, we decided we're going to replace that casework too because it's in pretty bad shape. So it actually is, that's one of the reasons why the cost estimate's a little bit higher than it was a few months back. So this is an interior view of that new ag lab. So if you're familiar, maybe you are, maybe not, they are in a small 700 square foot classroom right now. It's just a basic classroom. So they don't have this kind of a space. And so this ag lab is going to be connected to that greenhouse. So it's going to be very convenient. Plus there are storage rooms to the right that are currently biology storage, but they're going to become ag storage. This is the new commercial kitchen. So this plan is kind of showing the residential kitchen on the left, the commercial kitchen on the right. You can see it is much larger. There's a lecture space on the south end of that large classroom. And then up above it is set up just like a commercial kitchen. The door that you see goes into that commercial pantry area. Dishwashing is in the back. And of course, we've got commercial dishwasher in there, so you learn how to use that, just like a restaurant. Cold prep on the left, and all the cooking on the right, with a large hood over everything on that side. This is the residential kitchen area, and totally replacing that. Those kitchens are pretty original to the building. So circa 1950s, 60 kitchens now, and those will be updated to new kitchens with microwave space and pull-down reels and so on. This is one of the typical chemistry labs, those new labs that are being constructed in the courtyard. Of course, fume hoods, that's the big box to the right. That's a fume hood with flame and acid cabinets below. All of the tables will be on wheels, so everything can be moved around. Computer monitors up above the sinks, so students can plug in their equipment, whether it's a microscope, modern day microscope that you can plug in, or any devices that they're using in the classroom. Base cabinets all around, some wardrobe cabinets, marker boards, pull-down electric reels. And we just added a lot more outlets to the rooms today in our design meeting with the teachers. Go ahead. These are the physical science rooms. They're very similar to the other rooms. The only thing they don't have are the fume hood spaces, but otherwise they're pretty similar, so that all the science labs can kind of be used for similar things if needed. Go ahead. This is the physics lab. This is kind of a combination physics and chemistry lab. A lot of the same stuff, everything from eye wash and shower, fire extinguisher cabinet, automatic gas shut off, kind of the panic button, goggle cabinets, all the details have been worked through. Go ahead. We don't have images downstairs of the shop spaces because they're really all about the equipment, and we don't have images of all that equipment. But again, you can see those classrooms up above. We've created new rooms on the north end of the wood shop. One is a finishing room, so that the students who are finishing their work don't have the dust of the space that's getting in the varnish or whatever the finishing products are, and it can be separately exhausted. And then the CNC laser has its own room as well on that north end. A little room down in the corner behind Randy is a little furnace room for the HVAC equipment. And then all the rooms down below, that welding lab with new welding stations along the bottom. We just heard about a piece of equipment that's being donated by Emerson. It's going to be located kind of where that dot is by the pair of double doors. It's going to be located against that wall. And we kind of worked through some final locations and power requirements today in that room. And then the metal lab down below. All those little rectangular boxes are pieces of equipment, and we've got those defined now and their power requirements. And then to the side, that's the addition with the building trades. On the upper part of that, you see a strange-looking rectangle with a lot of lines through it and some stairs. That's a mezzanine that it doesn't go up too far, but far enough that students can get underneath, and that's for training on how to install plumbing from below. So that's really a plumbing mezzanine. There'll also be electrical panels on that wall as well as how to train to kind of do electrical work. Overhead doors on the right, and you can see the dash box where you can bring a project in and work on that inside and take it in and out through there. And it lines up with an overhead door that takes you into the welding and a project space. You see the project spaces with the dash boxes, the same thing in the metal shop. In auto mechanics, there is a lift. An auto lift, and then a bench along the south wall that'll be for small engines, and a compressor room for that loud compressor. So that's kind of the layout of those new spaces. This is what it looks like on the outside. Again, looking at that addition, the existing really 3-story wall of the school from this lower side, and this is our very tall space so that we can bring those projects into the auto shop and into the building trades shop. So there's translucent panels across the top to bring daylight in. We need to maximize wall space in here because we need it for teaching, but we've got those translucent panels like on the auxiliary gym to bring in that daylighting and really light it up. And you see a little kind of lean-to on the side of the building there. That's actually a place to store the welding tanks. So they'll be stored out there in a fenced-in area, so they're not all stored inside. And when they need them, they'll come out and bring new ones in. You also note that the windows that are above the addition, and even a couple of the other windows in the science lab, they're going to get smaller. The head's going to stay the same place, but the sill is being raised up. And we realize because the science lab casework is taller, we're going to have to do that to more of the windows that don't have it shown in this elevation yet, but this drawing's a couple weeks old. So that Bobcat Careers signage is going to go on the outside, and we'll have some lighting to light that up. Okay. This is the budget update. So over on the right is kind of the summary page for a detailed cost estimate. The far right column is where we're at with the schematic design estimate for the total project. It was $11,859,000. Might as well call it $860,000. Then the design development phase, when we completed that, we updated it. It was $11,847,000, and now we're at $12,218,000. A big part of that ad was we're replacing a bunch more casework. We're adding some more power and data. We do have also some alternates that are kind of hard to see, but they're on the bottom over here. And they're mostly really related to replacing some paving at the drive and pricing out asphalt versus concrete. we've seen those prices kind of going back and forth after the last 9 to 12 months. We don't know what they're going to be a month from now, but if we can get concrete, that would be great. And if the price is close, that's what we want to do. So we're going to see what those numbers come out to be. As far as the timeline, this is where we're at. November 6th, it says construction document meeting 100%. It's really 99% because we've got a bunch of changes after today's meeting with the teachers to kind of do that last run through with them. Our hope is to be able to issue the documents on Thursday. It may very well be Friday to bidders. We've got a pre-bid meeting with those potential bidders set for November 17th. The bids will be due on December 11th. So a little more than a month. They'll have plenty of time to put their bids together. We'll be issuing a recommendation to you pretty quickly, within a couple of days, and then you've got a board meeting on the 18th to hopefully be able to be in a position to award that contract. So that's kind of where we're at. Any questions from the board? Okay.
When this all goes through, what's our targeted date to move in? You asked?
We have a substantial completion date that is just before classes start in the fall.
Nice.
It's very aggressive, but that's what we're going with. As we look at it, the addition is small. The courtyard infill, it's not like we have to build a structure so much. The walls are there. The greatest challenge we're probably going to have is that we have deep foundations in the courtyard and for the addition. You have terrible soils here, which we discovered while doing the gym addition. And when we first bid that out, we found out that shoring costs were well over $100,000, temporary shoring. So we've got some time where we have to crane in equipment into the courtyard and start that work. Depending on the ability to start some noisy work in the courtyard really is going to dictate how quickly that work can be completed. So the intent is that it's all done at the same time, but if for some reason the chemistry labs aren't quite done and they take another month, the other rooms are set up, the other science labs are set up to be used with gas and electric and everything except fume hoods that can be used for those labs if need be. And if anything else is not done, it might be the construction trades piece, but the hope is that it can all be completed. It's fairly simple construction, and we expect the biggest challenge is going to be actually renovating the existing probably science labs and getting those taken apart and put back together during the summer. So if you haven't scheduled the start of school for next year yet, push that back a week for us. That'll help you out. Okay.
Thank
Another
you,
question?
Kevin.
Yeah.
And that courtyard is just the one level, right? So will it be something where we can build on eventually, or is it?
We have designed it structurally so it would support another level in the future, and we've set the roof deck so that when you poured a concrete deck on it, it would align with the floor above. Now, because this is science, there is lots of exhaust and mechanical units sitting there. So there'll be lots of chases in the future. But we have 8 fume hoods that have bad smells, which means we want to extend those exhaust pipes up, a little higher than the windows in the classrooms above, and lots of other exhaust coming out of those rooms too. Just general exhaust, as well as a couple units. So yes, you can do it. We've designed it so it can be added onto in the future. There would be a lot of things that would have to be raised up, but we've made it as efficient as you can possibly do it.
Want to commend FEH on the extensive amount of time spent working with the various teachers whose spaces are being impacted, no different than some of the other facility additions or improvements that we've made. They've been engaged pretty much since the beginning till today, and should be very hopefully pleased with the plan going forward.
Several of the staff came in over the summer and worked with us, and even a couple of them before they were formally hired, I think, because several of them are brand new. The family and consumer science teachers especially, yeah. So that helped us a lot early on in the layouts and the functionality of their spaces.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I need to open the public hearing regarding approval of the plans, specifications, and form of contract for the high school CTE project. Anyone here to give comment this evening? Doesn't look like it. Any written comments received, Randy?
No, none received.
Then I will close the public hearing regarding approval of the plans, specifications, and form of contract for the high school CTE project, and we will move on to the consent agenda, where we have minutes from the October 16 board meeting. Dr. Ryan, anything of note in the personnel items? Interagency agreements and contracts, we have a number of them. A memorandum of understanding with Iowa Valley Community College District for the extension of the teacher paraeducator registered apprenticeship program. An agreement with Nagel Signs for the marching band trailer wrap replacement. An affiliation agreement with Drake University for clinical learning experiences. A quote from Interstate Energy Systems for a gas generator for the Tornado Safe Room in the amount of $25,000. Statewide voluntary preschool program agreements with Bobcat Academy, St. Francis, and the YMCA for the 23-24 school year. A sub-award agreement with the Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for school safety improvements. Service order renewal with Thought Exchange effective January 1, 24 to December 31, 2024. Systems management and balancing proposal for testing the air handling system for the kitchen at MHS. A Granite revised agreement to install wireless systems to back up emergency lines at each building. Quote from Gordon Flesh Company for cloud faxing. And a resolution agreement with the Office of Civil Rights of the U.S. Department of Education to ensure district programs, services, and activities communicated or facilitated online are accessible to people with disabilities. Questions about any of those items? We also have interagency agreements with BCLUW School District for 5 special education students. Open enrollments, we have 11 out and 4 in. Randy, anything to note in bills?
No.
We have the donation of a Phoenix dry rod electrode stabilizing oven for the Marshtown High School Welding Department from Emerson. And we have the Equity Committee membership. Dr. Ryan, anything you want to say about that? Okay. Questions about any of those items? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
McGinnis, Lowry, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0 with 1 abstention. Got it. Anybody on the pink sheet this evening?
Nope.
Nope. Daisy, you're up. It's on.
Okay.
Deanna, can you hear us?
Yeah. Sorry. I don't feel too good today, guys.
Okay. Deanna, do you want to start with the first 3 slides and I can finish up with the last 3?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Okay, so for our school board report, we're going to start off with the TRIO overnight trip, which was hosted November 1st through November 2nd. And what they did the beginning of November 1st was they went to the UNI campus and admissions, and they had a tour, and they were able to talk to their admissions counselors there. And then they went to the dairy farm tour center and bowling and dinner at the UNI campus. And then the next day they went to the University of Iowa they had a tour at the University of Iowa, and they got to meet the admissions counselors as well. And the FFA, which is a national organization that supports students with premier leadership, personal growth, and career success, hosted a Halloween barn dance. So 35 high school students dressed up for the contest, and they gave out individual, couple, and group prizes. The individual and group, the couple received a $15 gift card to Starbucks, and the group received a $50 gift card to Wayward Social. And then the Freaky Friday musical, which was at the Marshalltown Performing Arts Center Auditorium, was Friday and Saturday at 7, and the general admissions was $6 at MHS.
Okay, and then the NHS also had their blood drive last month, and so these are just like the follow-up results. 54 people on the schedule went into the drive. 51 registered to donate, and then out of those 51, 30 were first-time donors. We also had 41 which were able to donate, and then 44 units of blood collected. So a grand total of 132 lives were saved or sustained. The NHS is also going to be hosting a bake sale as their fundraiser activity. We're looking forward to doing like baked goods provided by the NHS members, individually packaged treats, which we're going to be talking more about tomorrow on our monthly meeting. We're thinking about getting cookies, Rice Krispie treats, cupcakes, and then that's going to be hosted on November 20th and then the 21st. So right before Thanksgiving break, and then during the lunch periods and after school. And we're also moving into our November student Rotarians, which is going to be a new group of student Rotarians for this month. Our first meeting is going to be Tuesday, November 7th, so tomorrow. And then the students will be presented to the Rotary members during that meeting, where they'll be making their introductions and talking about themselves.
Any questions for Daisy or for Deanna? Thank you. Is this you, Randy?
Yeah, I don't, Matt.
Going to come up, or?
I don't know, Matt, if you want to talk to this, speak to this at all. This is just an annual approval for spending authority, an SBRC request for our participation in the River Hills Consortium. It's the administrative costs this year. That amount is, I lost my $7,208.31. So. If you want to come up and speak to it, that's fine. Otherwise, if there's any questions of the board, we can answer those.
Are there any questions? We might save you a trip, Matt.
Guinness steps in.
You're good.
As he sits down.
Okay, now somebody ask a question.
Okay.
No, is there a motion to approve the application to the School Budget Review Committee in the amount of $7,208.31 for special education administrative costs associated with the River Hills Consortium as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Lowry Hernandez, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so tonight I have for you our annual certified enrollment presentation. This is done each year in conjunction with our early retirement policy, as our voluntary early retirement policy states that the board will make a decision on whether to offer early retirement or not based off of certified enrollment numbers. So I have a short presentation for you here tonight. Again, this is an overview that's intended to be broad and related to funding, so we won't be discussing any sort of delivery methods for students. But Iowa school funding formula requires districts to count students each year on October 1st. The legislature will then determine what supplemental state aid per student will be, hopefully during the first 30 days of the session after the first of the year. And then those two are the main drivers to calculate the funding that's received during the upcoming 24-25 school year. Our current cost per pupil for the 23-24 school year is $7,641 per student. So, just a couple of quick definitions for you here. The actual enrollment is the number of resident pupils enrolled in the district, which is our head count. And then our certified enrollment is based on actual enrollment, but also includes weightings for special ed, supplementary weightings for such as students taking college courses, dual enrollment, non-publics, et cetera, as of that October 1st count date. This also determines our following year spending authority. And then there's served enrollment, which is our residents plus our open enrolled ins minus our open enrolled outs. That's an important number to look at, as well as that funding follows the student. Next slide. So I guess this would be a good news, bad news scenario. Bad news, if you want to look at it as bad news, is our certified enrollment, which is that budget enrollment count did drop from last year to this year. We went from 5374.8 down to 5352.2. But on the plus side, our total served enrollment did increase from the prior year from 4911.3 to 4922.7. That was mainly, we had a large increase in our open enrolled in from last year to this year of 38 students, which on the next slide, you will see that breakdown of open enrolled ins, which is that orange bar, and then versus the open enrolled outs, which is the blue bar over the last several years. And then the gray boxes on top is that net between the two. So again, good news, our net open enrolled in versus out dropped from 442.5 to 419.5. But again, the funding follows the students, so there is a price tag attached to that. So that expense of those 419 students is about $3.2 million to the district. And the next slide, just a quick summary, just showing a breakdown of the enrollments by levels year over year. I really don't have much to speak to on this slide. It looks fairly steady compared to current year to prior year. And then the next slide here is just some things to keep in mind as to what this means moving forward. Again, our supplemental state increase for fiscal year 25 is currently unknown. As at this point in time, when we look ahead for that, whether we would be on the budget guarantee, right now is if we would not be on the budget guarantee if SSA is 1.5% or higher next year. So depending on what the legislature sets will determine whether we might end up in a budget guarantee for next year's budget or not. So, but a 2% SSA increase would equal new money to the district of $645,000, which would equate to a 1.57% increase overall for the district. That's really all I have for you. This is just the first piece of the puzzle as we start thinking. I know it's weird to think about the 24-25 school year budget already in November, but that is just around the corner. So shortly after the first of the year, we'll really be laying the groundwork for that budget for next year. But that is my quick synopsis on our high level enrollment. So.
I think the thing that stuck out to me the most was in the open enrollment in, out, and net, where from 2016 to present, we've had a net gain of about 100 students. Mm-hmm. So open enrollment out has been decreasing and open enrollment in has been increasing over the course of that time.
Any other questions or thoughts?
What do we attribute to this year's open enrollment into our school district? We had quite a bit of a jump there, I see. Is there anything we can attribute that to at all?
I don't know that, I mean, anything that I would say regarding that would be assumptions, but I think, I would like to believe that people are paying greater attention to all of the programs and opportunities that we're able to provide that maybe others are not. One of the challenges, I think, is it really becomes differentiated once you get to the middle school and high school levels. And, you know, people are oftentimes making these decisions when their kids are entering school, but they're not seeing necessarily the back half of that educational journey where there's just significant difference in what kids can have access to within a larger district versus smaller districts, and particularly with a lot of the nice enhancements and improvements that we've made over time. But I don't know, Shauna, if you have anything to add to that, or?
Gut reaction kind of comments that are similar to Darren's. Stacy Monner, who has been, our registrar for years, said that she feels she's engaged in a lot of conversations around rescinding open enrollment as well, more than she remembers. So I think staffing shortages in the smaller districts contribute as well. If a high school doesn't have an in-person math teacher and the students have no choice but to engage online, parents might decide at that point that they're going to go somewhere where their son or daughter can have an in-person math teacher, and that's here. So I think really every scenario is a case-by-case situation. We've done an excellent job telling our story with the help of Abby, and I think that there's just a lot of positivity around what we're able to do here.
Anything else from anybody?
How do we count students who, I guess, is it open enrolled in and out? Because if they're in another district but coming in for a certain activity like swim or something that they don't have in their own district, do we have those?
Those students don't get counted. There's sharing agreements that districts have where we bill for the portion of those students participate. So like, let's say bowling, for instance,
Yeah.
We'll bill East Marshall or GMG for, their portion of the cost for the coaching and any of the other costs related to that program. Yep. But they're not counted on the enrollment piece, no.
So how does it work with homeschoolers that come in for orchestra or band or sports?
They would be dual enrolled.
Yeah, so there's a portion, like a 0.1 or a 0.3 weighting assigned to those students that we do count for that, yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think everybody remembers, but when you look at the kind of roller coaster, a little bit of a roller coaster of the enrollment, we saw a significant decrease after the tornado of 2018. We also saw a decrease. We rebounded pretty nicely after the tornado a year later, and then we saw another decrease of similar magnitude as we experienced the pandemic and the derecho in 2021-ish. And we're building back towards where we were pre-tornado and pandemic, but we're not quite there yet with students served.
Thanks, Randy.
Yep.
Which leads you right into
early
early
leads me
retirement.
right into early retirement, yep. So again, per our board policy, this is to be reviewed annually by the board to determine whether to offer earlier retirement incentives or not. So Dr. Schutte, Dr. Ryan, and myself met on October 27th to review the data of all the staff eligible for early retirement this year. Overall, there were 42 staff members that were eligible for early retirement. But after reviewing the data and discussing and noting that there are still several unfilled positions within the district, and historically, early retirement incentives have been used as a cost-saving mechanism for the district. And due to our current healthy financial position, along with those number of unfilled positions, our recommendation to the board this year is to not offer early retirement. So, I don't know, Dr. Schutte, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
No, I would concur with what Randy said. Our intent is not to never offer it again, but it needs to be at a time that's mutually beneficial. And the challenges that we've experienced each of the last 2 years with hiring certified teachers particularly, I just don't think it would be wise to encourage or incentivize people to go earlier than they might normally go under those circumstances.
Questions or comments from anybody? I mean, I would say I think I agree with Randy, with you and Theron, with the shortages that we've had and the difficulty that we've had recruiting and hiring teachers particularly, and support staff as well. I don't know that I could support offering it this year.
We need to keep our staff, as long as we can keep our staff.
Yes.
You don't want to lose them. No.
Anything else from anybody? If not, then we need a motion to approve not offering the early retirement incentive for the fiscal year 2024 as presented.
This is with the understanding that you will review the same data again at this time next year.
That is per our board policy, yes. Every year we review it.
It's so moved.
I'll second it.
McGinnis Lowry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-0. Matt.
Matt's up.
I know this is on the screen, but I do have physical copies here for you.
The board packet attachment, Amy.
And we have one new board member back here. You can look at it too. So good evening. My name is Matt Gillespie from Piper Sandler in Des Moines. And we are going to look through this packet. We'll go through it fairly quickly. It's somewhat straightforward. But the board, the district hasn't gone through this for a little while. So some of you in particular have never gone through this as a board member. So even if I kind of skip over something or go more quickly than you would like, I can talk for hours. Kevin can vouch for that. But I don't think you want that to happen. But certainly you can ask questions, any questions you have, as many questions as you want is perfectly fine. So this first page, the summary of the proposals, I think you're all aware, hopefully, that we were taking proposals this afternoon at 1 o'clock for the sale of sales tax revenue bonds. And we did break that out into options for the bidders. They could bid just $10 million. They could bid or they could bid $13 million. The district was wanting $13 million as a whole, but for some tax reasons, which I won't take the time to explain unless you want to ask questions, there is potentially sometimes a benefit to issuing $10 million or less in a calendar year. So that's why we offered the $10 million, and then there was going to potentially be a $3 million piece that you would be taking bids for maybe about a month from now that would not have actually closed until after January 1st, so it would be in a new calendar year. But we also know that many of these larger banks that do oftentimes bid, they don't care about that particular tax break. They don't get that benefit. It's not beneficial to them for whatever reason. So sometimes they don't care if it's 10 million or 10 billion. They can bid if they want to, and it doesn't affect their interest rates. And we did actually find that to be true today. So you can see along the far right column of the main table, you can see there are several items where some of the banks were bidding the 10 million and some of the banks were choosing to bid 13 million. And some of them are the same banks. So the difference really, and you see quite a few proposals from JP Morgan Chase, which is, of course, the largest bank in the country. And they do now have Iowa branches. That's important. I don't think they've started building one here in Marshalltown, but there are, I know, at least 4 in the Des Moines metro area, and there's some others around the state as well. So they're beginning to have a bigger presence here in Iowa, and they're extremely aggressive with these bonds. They have bought, over the last 5 years, I would say, of this type of transaction, where it's called a private placement, they probably have purchased upwards of 50 to 60% of all of the sales tax bonds that have been sold in Iowa by schools. So very, very aggressive. They will not bid, however, on transactions that are longer than 10 years. So that's also important for us to know, because we want them to be bidding because they are aggressive. And in your case, your repayment for this particular 10 or 13 million did not require you to go out longer than 10 years. And it's not beneficial for you to do that because you can obviously save a lot of interest by repaying the debt in a shorter period of time, just like you or I would if we were paying back our car loan or student loan or house loan or whatever you may have. So you can see the different proposals there. The interest rate is kind of in the middle. It is not the only thing that we look at. So it's not as simple as just saying, okay, what's the lowest interest rate? That's what we will choose. And in fact, you see there, the JP Morgan Chase, they had on the $10 million proposal 4.49%, and then the $13 million proposal 4.57%. However, underneath 2 columns over the call date, you see it says non-callable. So what that means is they were proposing those, relatively speaking, very low interest rates. Obviously, interest rates have risen significantly over the last month in particular, but over the last 2 years significantly. But they're still lower than what we have been seeing. But those low interest rates come with the caveat that you could never pay the bonds off early. And while you may never choose to pay the bonds off early, you might never have the resources to pay the bonds off early. Usually we say to you, you need the option to pay them off early because you may have extra cash that's dumped on you. That'd be really nice if that happened, probably unlikely. But more likely would be that interest rates may drop back down sometime in the next few years. And if that happens, you could refinance the bonds. But if you can't pay them off early, you can't refinance them. So that would be one option to potentially refinance the bonds at some point in the future. And then also, if and when the district has additional needs to borrow significant amounts of money, if that is happening, you may need to take this bond issue or one of the other bonds that you have still outstanding, and you might need to restructure it for some reason in order to get lower payments on an annual basis so that you can add additional new payment on top of that annual payment and still afford to make the payments. But if the bonds, again, aren't callable, you can't make any type of adjustment with them. So even though those are very attractive interest rates in today's world, and a few years ago, we routinely did recommend that schools accept the non-callable rates because they were so low. In this same situation, we might have seen interest rates as low as 1%. And it was unlikely that certainly those bonds were never going to be refinanced. Even if the districts had extra money, they would not be paying those bonds off early. There's other needs that you and every other district have, pressing needs of needing more buses, needing newer buses, needing carpet replaced, needing roofs replaced, HVAC repair, all of those types of things. But now that rates have risen a little bit, that's not really the what we fall back to say, hey, you're probably never, ever going to be able to change this. You realistically could. So we really kind of throw out those two that are non-callable. Although that's your prerogative as the board, you can accept anything that you want to. It doesn't matter what I say or what I think, you can do whatever you want. Then we come to the third item, which is 4.58, also JP Morgan Chase, but that's the $10 million proposal. Whereas the next best bid that you see highlighted there from Webster Bank, that is a bank that most of you probably have not heard of, but it's a very large bank in Ohio and elsewhere. So it would be similar to here in Iowa where we have U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo, It's not quite as big as those banks, but it would be a large banks on that similar sizing. Now they're offering the not bank qualified, the larger amount, but only at 3 basis points difference. So that 3 basis points difference between 4.58 and 4.61 is almost negligible. In particular, technically you were not taking bids for the $3 million piece today. If you only accept $10 million, you're going to have to come back in a few weeks and accept bids for the $3 million. And it's very possible, although we don't know, that the rates at that time could be higher than just that 3 basis point difference. Now, they could be lower, and that would be beneficial, but they could be higher, and that would be not good. So since this is something you have in your hand, so to speak, a bird in the hand, you can absolutely lock it in and know what the result is. And the 4.61, again, although it's not as low as what we had hoped for 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and certainly not 2 years ago, it is still right in the range of what we're seeing. It's actually a little bit lower than what a couple other school districts have gotten recently, but very, very similar. And because then you can also lock in the $13 million and you don't have to come back to this process again, pay additional attorney fees, et cetera, et cetera. We do think that 4.61 with the call date you see there is in 2029. So still allowing you some flexibility to make changes, if that becomes necessary. That Webster Bank bid of 4.61 we think is probably the most favorable. But again, that is ultimately up to you to decide. Before you make that decision, we're going to the next page. And here you can just see at the top, basically just a sort of a different format of those different banks that we're bidding. But more importantly, what I'm showing you this for is to show you the list of other banks. We didn't just send this to very large banks around the country, although we did send it to other large banks as well. But we did send it to banks that are here in the Marshalltown area, in the Marshall County area, central Iowa, other parts of the state, big and small banks that we know sometimes are interested in this type of transaction. So just because, in particular, maybe your locally owned bank did not bid, that's not unusual. This is, when we're looking at 10 million or 13 million, that's a lot of money for some smaller banks. Many of them can't lend that amount of money. So just because you might see one of your area banks on the list that didn't bid, that's not to say that they didn't like the credit or they didn't want to lend to Marshalltown or whatever the case may be. There are many, many reasons why those other banks on this particular day could not or chose not to bid. But we did send it to lots of banks. What you received is a lot of bids. We don't typically see that many proposals for sales tax. If you were selling general obligation bonds, so that'd be voted property tax-backed bonds, we would see that many or more usually. But with sales tax, there are just many fewer institutions that will not bid because of regulatory reasons, just the makeup of how their bank is owned, the ownership. A lot of times these banks are owned sometimes by children. I know that sounds crazy, but the family may own a bank, but they actually have given shares to all of their children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews, and those children don't make enough income to pay taxes. These bonds are tax-free, so there's no benefit to a minor, for example, getting tax-free income because they are not going to pay taxes anyway, at least not until they're older. So that would be a reason why some of those banks may not choose to bid as well. This page that you see in front of you are up on the screen right now, so it's the third page in the packet. This is the sources and uses of the funds. Now, this is presuming that you agree and that you award to the Webster Bank, which you will make that decision in a few minutes. But under that assumption, you see here issuing the full $13 million of bond principal. And then up in the top, still that section, there is the FEMA grant, $3.4 million, and then the estimated earnings during the construction. Now, this number actually might be significantly different after hearing Kevin speak a few minutes ago, because that $1,013,000, although it was using a lower than what you could get interest rate today, I was trying to be somewhat conservative in that aspect. I was making the assumption that the $13 million was basically being spent over 2 years. And it sounds like, hopefully, the project is actually going to be done next August, September, October-ish, whenever that might be. So the money's not going to sit in the bank nearly as long. So that is going to deteriorate that number. That is not going to be $1,013,000. Ultimately, that isn't a big deal for at least the CTE and the tornado safe. project, it's the high school kitchen that then will need funding from some other source. Because you see down in the bottom section there, the CTE project, we did increase that this afternoon to 12.2 million, knowing what FEH had given, the information that they had given to you. The tornado safe facility, 3.9 million. And then we just knew that whatever was left over, if there's leftover funds, then would be directed towards the kitchen. And maybe another borrowing or funding from some other sources a year from now, 2 years from now, or whenever that might be. So that was 1.2 million. I mean, I'm going to just guess, this is a wild guess, but let's just say the 1,013,000 is only 500,000 if you're only having it on deposit for half as long, although you can earn higher than what I was assuming, so maybe you earn a little bit more. But roughly, that probably means that right now for the high school kitchen, you could be looking at maybe 700-ish thousand, depending on, again, how much interest is actually earned on the bond proceeds as they sit there in the bank. Does that make sense? So don't look at this, and Kevin, don't look at this and think there's $1.2 million to spend. There will be eventually probably, but it'll take some other resources to get to that number. The page after that is showing the repayment schedule of the bonds. So you can see very small principal amounts, and by small, I mean these are not small to me and probably not to you, $300,000 annual principal amounts, but in the bigger scheme of things, they're quite small from the district's point of view. And that's because you have existing debt during that period between 2025 and 2028. So we couldn't add significant, large amounts of principal to be repaid because you also have to make the payments on the other bonds. And you'll see that in just a second on a different worksheet. But then the bigger payments begin in 2029 through 2032. For those of you that have been on the board long enough or maybe just have paid attention to school finance long enough, the 2028 date it's not just coincidental. The sales tax was originally going to end in December of 2029. So the payments for most schools that issued bonds over the last decade or so basically ended in 2028 or 2029 because that's when the sales tax was going to go away. And there was not going to be any revenue after that period of time. Of course, in 2019, the legislature extended that tax. Now it goes to 2051, so schools are borrowing for that longer period of time now. So you have a significant capacity to borrow more money over the years, depending on when you might need to borrow money next, whether that's a year from now or 2 or 3 years from now or 6 or 7 years from now. The sooner that you need to borrow money, the less you're going to be able to capture because we need enrollment to grow if it's going to grow, getting away from these periods where there's these higher payments between now and 2028, et cetera. But you can still borrow significant amounts in the next 12 to 24 months. But once you get beyond basically 29, 2030 in that period of time, then you're going to have very significant amounts that you could fund because then you'd be borrowing probably, at least theoretically, through a 20-year period, probably through the end of the tax in 2051, longer than some of us will even be around. The district would still be, repaying that debt. So just because these are, relatively large payments that we are seeing does not mean that the district does not have resources to move forward again for some other projects down the road. The page after that is the color page. This basically is just kind of pulling everything that we just looked at together. So the sources and the uses, those are shown in the two small boxes in the top left. Where that little arrow is coming from, that was just explaining that for that $1 million interest earnings, that's where I said I was using a 24-month construction period and a 4.75% interest rate, earning interest rate. Right now, the district, if you put that money in the bank today, literally today, you could have unquestionably earned at least 5.03%. Because that's what the Iowa School Joint Investment Trust, that's what their fund was paying. You might earn higher than that if you go to your banks and ask them for investment bids. You could invest it in Treasury securities, bank CDs of banks that have branches in Iowa, IceJet, et cetera. So there's other options, and that will be, I assume, up to Randy. The board has probably directed those types of authority to him. But I just would say to Randy and to the board, if you're not earning at least 5%, you need to look somewhere else because that's interest that you're just throwing away by not earning it. And you need all the interest you can get so that the kitchen project later can be funded to any higher degree that you can. So in the big table, though, that's there, the main table on that page, just to the right of the blue dotted lines going up and down the middle there, you see numbers that are right about 3.1 million. That's the existing sales tax bond payments that you already have from years past. So that's why we could not add more than the 300,000. Now, technically, we could add more, but it gets to the point where the payments are too large, or you then are boxed in and you couldn't issue more debt next year or 2 years from now. So we wanted to keep that to be a reasonable amount, but that's why you see that the payments that we're adding today are less through fiscal year 28, because you already have those $3.1 million payments. So today's bond takes the total annual obligation between now and 2028 to right around $4 million for principal and interest. You're generating about $6.6 million, and that $6.6 million is based off of the lower certified enrollment that Randy just discussed with you. So now that that has become an official count, we have to use that number, and you are paid sales tax based off of the certified number. It is not based off of the actual served students. That's very beneficial for Marshalltown. And there are some districts actually that feed off of your open enrolled out that would love to see that law changed, but I would be one person that would be saying absolutely not. Because even though I work with those districts as well, the kids that open enroll out, they can just as quickly open enroll back in. But if the school district, whether it's the neighboring districts or whether it's you, if you have borrowed off of account of a kid that's sort of artificially coming into your district, they don't live here, and you obligate the payment for a much larger amount, and then those kids leave and go back to their home district, you wouldn't have enough money to make the payment on the debt. And that really is number one priority, that the debt has to be paid. So if all of a sudden there were 500 kids going out and some school was borrowing off those 500 kids, and then the 500 kids came back, it'd be great for you, but the school that borrowed against the 500 kids, they'd be, their debt would be going into default, and we don't want that to happen to any school in Iowa. So there is an absolute reason why it should be paid to you based off of the certified students that live in this district, regardless of whether they go to school here or not. So if you have the ear of any of your legislators, because they've been making lots of kooky changes lately, just make sure that if they say anything to you about that you are against that, because especially in a district like Marshalltown, where you do have more open enroll out, you want to make sure that you're getting that revenue. The page after that is showing us a history of sales tax revenue and certified enrollment, and then a projection of what it might be in the future. And of course, this is a projection that is basically a wild guess, because none of us can predict what's happening barely next year, let alone for the next almost 30 years. But the top left table, that's showing you the actual number of certified students. So certified, remember, that's the number of kids that physically live in this district. Those kids do not all go to school here. But it's the number of kids that physically live here, and that count has gone from 5135 in 2001 to 5352 with this last count. So even though you did lose some kids and you've lost some kids the last couple of years, you're still above where you were 20 years ago. And most school districts in Iowa cannot say that. Even some of the metro districts can't say that. So that's a good thing. We would certainly like to see less open enroll out. You would like to see that. But at least you have more certified students than you have over the history. In that orange box, you see the number 0. And again, that's just me hopefully being conservative, saying we're not going to project any growth in the enrollment, but we're also not projecting any decline in the enrollment, certified. So when we look at what you might be generating a year from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, we want to be using something that is reasonably accurate and maybe slightly on the conservative side. So in that big table that has the big black box around it, in the middle of the page, I think they're red. I'm colorblindish, so whatever the colored numbers are there, that's history. Those are things we know are true. But then moving forward, you see in the enrollment column, that enrollment stays stagnant at the 5352, but the revenue per student column still grows from this year's estimated $1,233 per student. Next year, maybe 1,252, and then keeps growing. Now, that's growing at 1.5% per year. And we have seen sales tax in Iowa grow historically between 2.5% and 3.5%. So the 1.5% today is pretty conservative. However, some things that affect it. One, of course, is the legislature. They keep taking more money away from this pot. So they keep diverting money away from the sales tax that you get and diverting it into perhaps property tax relief, perhaps other things, and who knows what they could do in the future. So we don't know. We know that it's not 3% that you're probably going to get in the future. So we're assuming that might be 1.5%. The other thing is that enrollment statewide is actually growing. So that's a good thing for Iowa. The more kids, the more pieces of the pie that's cut into. So even though it has grown at 3%-ish over, history, we know that there's probably, hopefully, going to be more students in Iowa because we want the population as a whole to grow. So that's also another reason why we're only using that 1.5% growth in the per student number. But even for those reasons, that doesn't mean that it may not grow at 1% or 0.5% sometimes. It might even go negative sometimes. We don't know. But what you can see there in the far column of the big table, if you're generating today around 6.6 million, which is about what you're getting per year from sales tax, you might be getting closer to 9.5 to 10 million by the time the sales tax ends out in 2050, without any enrollment growth, just with that 1.5% growth in retail sales. If you're looking closely, you see that the very last year drops from 9,700 to 4,900. That's simply because the last year's only half of a year. It ends January 1, so it ends in the middle of a fiscal year. And then the last page is the timeline, which is actually kind of changing significantly if the board agrees to award 13 million. You see that today we're at November 6th, that we were taking bids at 1 o'clock, and then the board is taking some action here shortly. We were also planning to take bids again December 4th, if you needed to take bids on the $3 million piece that maybe wouldn't have gotten issued today if you chose to accept a $10 million portion. And if that's the case, if you did do that, then those bonds you see would not close at the very bottom until January 3rd. But as it stands, if the board agrees to issue the entire 13 million now all at once, remember it's only that 3 basis point difference in interest rate is why we're suggesting or think that you should do that. Then nothing will happen on December 4th. It's going to, at the November 20th meeting, you'll complete the other standard legal documents that are standard with every type of bond issue that the school issues. That'll be provided to you by your attorney. You'll approve that stuff. And then the transaction will close on December 6th. So on December 6th, literally, you're going to get it wired into whatever financial institution you choose, $13 million. And then you'll start to spend that money to pay Kevin and construction costs, whatever the expenses are for the projects. So that might not have been as fast as you wished it would have been, but that's a pretty quick summary for me. Are there questions that any of you have about any of the pages, the process itself, the interest rates, where they came from? And then once you don't have questions, I'm actually going to lead you through the resolution that you need, but I'll wait and make sure you don't have any questions first.
Are there questions?
Okay.
Looks like you're in the clear, man.
Sounds good. Then I am going to paraphrase the resolution, which is the next item on your agenda. It's acceptable for me to do that. We just need to have one of the board members so move what I say and another board member to second that motion. And then you do have to have a roll call vote. So the motion before you is directing the sale of $13 million of school infrastructure, sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds, Series 2023, to Webster Bank of Columbus, Ohio.
So moved.
Second.
Faltis Hernandez. Randy will call the roll when he's ready.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Faltis,
Yes.
Stanley's absent, Heitman,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Lowry,
Yes.
Wall abstain. Okay.
Okay, that is all that you needed to do from a technical standpoint tonight. I do want to point out, actually, to you, Zach, I know we talked about it earlier, and I know where you work, et cetera. These actually are not marketable securities, so I think you probably could.
I
But
can vote then.
But that's okay. Yeah, it's a private placement, so they're not going to come back into the market, and you will not be able to sell them yourself to your clients because the bank will own them forever. So if that makes a difference to you, but that's it. If you guys come up with questions that you didn't think of tonight, if people in the community ask you questions you're not sure of the answers to, direct those to Randy. He probably will know the answers, but if not, he can typically find me just about wherever I might be around the state traveling. Good luck with your projects, and we will probably be speaking maybe in the next 12 to 24 months again about some other projects that you might be funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Rex.
Thank you for having me come. Asking for consideration of purchasing 2 buses from Hoagland Bus. It's taken us roughly a year to a year and a half to get buses. The ones you approved last year are not scheduled to be here until March this coming year. So everything's being pushed back to where we need to order earlier so we can get them to use them during the current school year. This is for the fiscal year 25. So we looked at Class C, which is your normal standard bus with the hood in front and everything. Then we looked at a Class D, which had the emergency door on the side and the engine in the back. Just looking at a different type of bus and seeing how that would help us. The problem was the number of passengers, because we've cut it down from 39-inch seats on the bus to 36. So we've gone to 2 people per seat because of seat belts, because you're not going to get a lot of our kids in three kids in a seat with seat belts. Just not going to, because the board policy says if they ride a bus with seat belts, they are to be wearing those. So instead of wasting district money on asking for putting in 3 seat belts and not use them like a lot of districts do, we've just given them more aisle space so kids can get up and down the aisle with their backpacks and everything else that they're bringing to school. So we're at, the low bid was Hoagland Bus for $150,297 for a total bid of $300,594 for the 2 buses, 52 passenger.
Any questions for Rex? I noticed there's nothing to trade, so we're just adding to the fleet.
Yeah, we're adding because we've traded off previous years and we've got it down to bare bones right now. And I want to safeguard for 1 year after, because depending on when they get in. And I'm leery of getting rid of buses if they don't come in on time.
Yeah, makes sense. If it takes a year and a half to get them.
Yeah, it does. And these buses will have air conditioning because they go online to be our activity buses first before they go on route. So we put air on those. So we'll go to 4, 5, 6 buses that will have air for our programs during the summer and everything.
Nice. If there are no other questions, is there a motion to approve the purchase of 2 buses from Hoagland Bus Sales in the amount of $300,594 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Lowry, McGinnis, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Hey, Rex, one more thing. This has nothing to do with buying buses. I've heard lots of good things from parents and folks involving activity trips in particular, and bus drivers. So I just wanted to say thanks to you, and you can share that with your bus drivers.
I will. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rex.
Just for clarification, we only own 2 air-conditioned buses right now, right? Or 2 of them, the ones we're waiting on,
Yep.
and then
Yep, we just have 2 in district right now.
now there's 4 air-conditioned buses that we'll be waiting on.
Yep, yep. We won't need them tomorrow.
Probably not.
Kevin and Kim, you guys going to come back up, or?
Sure.
I mean, you're still here.
Do we need to bring the drone? What do we got first? So,
It's the resolution formally, yeah.
again, it would be any questions. The only thing I would let you know is that after meeting with teachers, and you know how that goes, Randy, we probably added another $100,000 to the project today, but it's good. It's good stuff that they need. And we do have drawings, so if anybody wants to take a look at what's left of them, because we gave a few away today too. But the drawings, the specifications, and the former contract, which is the standard AIA contract that we've been using with the other projects, that's been reviewed by your attorneys, and the budget are all the components that you have. So I'm going to answer any other questions you might have.
Any questions? Then we need a motion to approve and adopt the plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimated total cost for the Marshalltown Community School District High School CTE project as presented.
Move for approval. Second.
Hernandez, Lowry, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Policies.
Board policies already.
So we have 3 policies coming back for first reading that you saw at the last meeting. 603.6 physical education, 604.7 dual enrollment, and 604.06 R1 instruction at a post-secondary educational institution. These policy recommended amendments are the same as what you saw at the last meeting. I would recommend approval and waiving the second reading.
Any questions about those policies? Then is there a motion to amend 60306, 60407, and 60406 R1 and waive the second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Lowry, Faltus, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-0. And then,
With the initial review, we have 2 policies that we're bringing forward to you to delete. We had revised and or adopted new policies based on legislation regarding student name changes in the summer, but they were numbered differently than some policies that we had existing in the books, and we had failed to recommend deleting those. So 502.13 student name changes and 502.13E1 student preferred name or gender change application we're recommending deleting because we have already approved the policies that will supplant these.
okay. Are there questions about 502.13 or 502.13E1? Is there a motion to delete those 2 policies?
So moved.
Second.
Lowry, Faltus, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay.
Sarah?
605.06 Internet Appropriate and Safe Use. Mark as reviewed as there's no changes to that one. 605.06 R1 Internet Appropriate and Safe Use Regulation. Mark as reviewed, no changes to that one. 605.07 Use of Information Resources, no changes, Mark as reviewed. Then 605.08 Accountability, Test Integrity / Test Preparation. This one, remove information regarding the storage of test materials as the tests are now virtual, which makes sense. First reading to amend that one. And then the last 2 that I have, 606.01 Class Size and Class Grouping, no changes, Mark as reviewed. And 606.02 School Ceremonies and Observances, no changes, Mark as reviewed.
Any questions for Sarah? Okay. So 60508 will come back next meeting for a first reading to amend, and the rest will be marked as reviewed. Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Director, District 5, Central Rivers AEA.
Yeah, we had one nomination presented to us for Dr. Mary Stevens, who, Matt, you'll have to affirm, was the special ed director for Central Rivers AEA. We would highly recommend that the board approve her recommendation or nomination.
Are there any questions? Not, we need a motion to cast a ballot for Dr. Mary Stevens for Director, District Number 5 for the Central Rivers Area Education Agency Board of Directors.
So moved.
Second.
Lowry McGinnis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-0. Reminders, I get to do policies for the next board meeting on November 20th, and Hoagland will be here to do their school presentation. Keep an eye out for your committees, if there are any in the next couple of weeks. And speaking of committees, committee reports. Teacher quality met a couple of weeks ago. Anybody, Jan?
They did, and I did go to it, and I don't remember really what we did. I'm sorry, Shauna. Do you have anything you want to add to
Shauna?
that?
So
Come use the.
I'll keep it quick. So last year, we had that retention stipend where we paid teachers $1,000. I don't know if you remember that, and that came out of TQ. So we were really looking at our balance, and we have about $200,000 that we have remaining to spend for this school year. We were actually celebrating that because normally we have quite a surplus that carries over. So we were really thinking through how we can spend that down. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, it's sounding very familiar.
And we didn't really land on specifics. We know that we want to open online academy for our teachers again this school year, which we've done in the past. That won't accumulate up to that $200,000. So we said we'd come back in the winter and continue brainstorming. And it's not the end of the world if we have to carry over some of those again. I know we were really trying to cut down some of that carryover last spring, which is why we came up with that $1,000 stipend.
Thanks, Shauna. SIAC committee also met last week. Anybody? Might be you again, Shauna.
I did go,
Okay.
and I also can't remember. Did we go over, we went over data, right? We went over data and that's something, I think it was shared to the board, so nothing new. What else did we talk about? There was a big conversation about preschool.
Yes. I almost need to pull up my agenda. Data was the big piece.
Yeah, data was the big piece, and that's what was shared at the board prior to. So, nothing new.
Okay. The equity committee met.
And I missed that one.
We had our first meeting for the year, and I'm really excited. We have a lot more students on board this year, which was one of our goals from last year, was to really get more students on the committee, so that was exciting. And we had a really awesome conversation and very lofty goals for the year, so we'll probably need to narrow it down a little bit more perhaps, but we talked about some goals being, we really want to get a quarterly newsletter that has some educational component to all students and staff. We want to create a word cloud that shows all of the languages that are spoken amongst our families. And then at the Welcome Center, which is the perfect place for this, perhaps it would be nice to have, maybe the 10 or 20 most common languages have a contact of somebody in the community, so that if a new family comes in and they say, I speak, X language, our Welcome Center staff could be like, oh, well, we have a member of the community who's volunteered to be the contact if you're looking for some resources or someone to connect with, So looking at that, and then maybe even like a they wanted to do once a month. I think maybe once or twice this year may be a more reasonable goal of having some sort of like potluck where people can come and gather and learn about other people's food and where they're from. And then finally, the committee was very interested in researching districts our size or like districts and looking at if they have an equity director, an actual administrator that's focus is on equity, looking into what other districts do, and then if that seems feasible or reasonable, then maybe even presenting that idea and that research to Dr. Schutte or the board or whomever would be the appropriate next step. But lots of really exciting things, great conversation, and a really good turnout. So I'm really excited for the committee this year. Thanks.
Thanks. And then Finance Committee, Matt. Zach? Anything from that committee that we didn't, I mean, mostly we talked about the bonding and paying for CTE and the other projects.
That was the main conversation.
Yeah. Okay. What have we done this evening to improve education for the students in Marshalltown?
Well, we're definitely bringing the high school up to the 21st century, maybe even the 22nd, as we're moving forward. What a huge jump from 1965 to now. So how exciting that is. In fact, I have one science teacher that's retired, that we frequently see each other. He goes, golly, I just can't believe what you guys are doing. That's just so awesome. So I don't think he'll come back, but he was really excited about the new resources that were available.
Be a recruitment strategy.
Yeah.
And I've actually heard a couple comments from the community. I think this is really well supported in the community.
This might be one that we won't get fighted over.
Anything else from anybody?
Don't forget to vote tomorrow.
Don't forget to vote tomorrow. The thing I was going to point out, we do this every year, but those voluntary preschool agreements with Bobcat Academy and with the YMCA and with St. Francis, those are huge, right? I mean, it's a bunch of kids, lots of preschoolers that benefit from that in our community. So, if there's nothing else, that is the end of the open portion of tonight's meeting. So we're going to take about 5 minutes and we'll come back and go into closed session. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sean.